When he was 21 years old, I would be home alone at my parents' house. A lot we lived on a little pond, which was directly in our backyard. On the other side of the pond was a little town park. Our neighbors were a bit spaced out. It was a pretty upscale, expensive block compared to the rest of the properties were big. I'm fully moved out now, but this was back when I was in college. My parents make a lot of money and we have multiple homes. Suf and I was home alone. It was a random night in the summertime. I was off from school, so I can't remember if it was the weekend or a weekday, but odds are since I was home, it was a random weekday. I was in the back sunroom watching a show. That was my favorite room in the house in the summer because it was the most cozy and had the best breeze with all the windows open. I was right on the corner of the couch, closest to the corner window, when I heard splashing from outside like in the pond. It could have been a goose or duck. Sometimes they'd fight in the water and make a bunch of splashing sounds, so at first ignored it, but as it persisted, I decided to lower the volume on the TV and listen. I put my ear up to the window, even and I heard consistent splashing sounds, way too heavy to be from a duck or goose. It sounded like they were splashes from a person. I opened the door in the sunroom and stepped outside to the deck. I looked out to the pitch darkness off the backyard. In our Dammons humming along with the splash as someone was definitely swimming in the water. They were trespassing each house on the pond. Ounda Pacific chunk of the pond. I stepped inside for a second to flick on the lights to the backyard deck. As I did this, just a bit of the pond was exposed and the splashes and humming stopped. Whoever it was clearly saw me. I wondered if it was one of the neighbors going for a swim or something, which also just seemed weird because noon really swam at the pond ever, but once whether it was or wasn't a neighbor. It was locking the door as well. I texted my brother who was away at college about it. That didn't answer right away. I was trying not to creep myself out over it, but watching TV after this was kind of hard. I couldn't focus on the show. I looked out the window, but all I could see outside was darkness. I still had the TV on in the background, not realizing how revealing the light from the TV would be outside. And then I thought I heard something on the deck. I hurried to find the remote and turn off the TV, and as the room went black and silent, it took me a few seconds to adjust and realized that there was the sound of someone's heavy breathing right outside one of the many windows in the room. I instantly laid down flat on the couch to try and hide myself, and after a short moment of silence, a deep voice from outside the window said, "I see you." My heart dropped into my stomach. I couldn't decide in the moment whether to speak or keep hiding, so I just blurted out, "Paulus," that you Paul was the name of one of our neighbors. I said this clinging on to the hope that maybe it was him and he was just messing with me, but the man outside didn't respond to this. I just heard footsteps walking away. As the barefoot-sounding footsteps faded to silence, I still laid flat on the couch, too afraid to move. I laid for a few minutes before the thought to go check that all the doors were locked came to mind. I exploded off the couch and ran straight for the front door. It was locked, as was the side entrance door. After a little while longer and texting my entire family about what was going on, my dad told me to turn the backyard lights on and check if anyone was still out there. He basically told me to be the man of the house and protect it. Oh, I listened and checked the back deck through the window. It was clear. I brought a big knife outside with me onto the deck, and I looked down. There were footprints that had half dried by then, but I could tell that they were barefoot footprints. It followed the trail footprints around to the side part of the deck, and what is always nightmare fuel, the top part of someone's head, namely their eyes and forehead, was peering just over the edge of the deck from the ground below, looking at me as if he heard me coming and was waiting. As we made eye contact, I turned away, and by now I was ready to call 911. I did so before even telling my parents. I locked myself inside waiting for them. Man, when they came, I felt instantly better. They asked if our family had any enemies or people who don't like us, or if we have any problem neighbors. Questions like this. They did do a quick sweep of the property and then left. I decided to shut every window that night and run the air conditioning just for added safety. When I woke the next morning, I was just delighted to see sunlight. I don't believe that man ever returned to our house, and Wes still don't know who it could have been. I have a dog who I take for a walk 3 times a day, first in the morning, then in the afternoon, and finally at night. I take him on the same route every time, which is through our driveway exit, which leads to a cul-de-sac parking lot for the condominium complex we'll live in. This will make sense as soon as to why I'm telling you this on the night walk. I always go somewhat late. I'm not sure why, but it's been a habit ever since I've had him, and it's never been a problem for us until one night. I begin our final walk of the day and go usual route. I have a flashlight with me. There are no lights at the parking lot, and I'm listening to music with only one AirPod. As I feel it would be for the best, just in case I heard something unusual, and I did as I'm approaching the parking lot. I was hearing something, a voice of some kind that was up ahead of me, but I was completely zoned out in my own world of music as it was happening. But then my mind finally caught up and stopped. It took the AirPod out and stood still to listen just to see if I was only hearing things, and then it happened again, a voice that spoke ahead of me, but I couldn't see anyone, so I did the stupid thing and continued to carefully walk forward, because I thought it was all in my head, but something didn't feel right about it. It stopped again after a few feet, right next to where all the cars were parked, and I had my flashlight pointed everywhere in front of me. I stayed listening, and the creepiest thing that has ever happened to me, it was hearing a muffled voice of what sounded like a kid say the word help. My heart dropped so fast I couldn't move my legs. It frantically pointed my flashlight everywhere to see where it was coming from. I was sure it was coming from the cars, but I was completely thrown off by this. But there wasn't a kid in sight or anyone nearby. It was just me and my dog, who didn't seem to notice anything, as she was just sniffing some bushes nearby. And then I heard it again. The word help was spoken 3 more times, and it was coming from my left side where the cars were parked. It made me panic even more. I didn't know what to think. I wasn't imagining this when my dog's ears perked up, and he was looking in the same direction. I was faced after it happened, and that's when it hit me about how incredibly eerie. All this was after hearing it multiple times. I realized the kid's voice didn't sound entirely like a kid. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like the mix of an adult and a child at the same time, and each time they called for help. Not only was the voice always muffled, but it was spoken in a more generic statement, as opposed to a cry for actual help every time. And it meant that literally there was absolutely no change in the tone, inflection, sound, or anything of sorts. My dog and I ran straight home afterwards, and it tried to explain to my mom what happened. She was puzzled herself about what it could have been, and as suggested we call the cops on the off chance that there was actually someone in need of help, but she didn't think it was necessary. So many questions were conjuring up in my head. Why was the voice muffled? Was there someone in the cart that I couldn't see? Or was it something darker waiting for me to move closer? I don't like to think too much about it, but whatever it was, it still makes me feel extremely disturbed to this day. This picture is where I had stopped and taken my AirPods out to listen, and I heard it up ahead on the left. This is where I had gotten closer and heard it in my left side. I'm aware that there's a condo complex on the right side, which some may think the noise was coming from. But it was in this direction, facing the cars, where my dog and I heard it, and you could see from this point of view that there's no thing to really indicate a noise coming from somewhere else. Also, at the time this happened, the cars that were parked were trucks and SUV types. So they were a lot larger and covering more space, thus making it harder to see from where I was standing. I never figured this out. What I'm about to tell you is the reason why my parents moved out of a house that was in the family for 3 generations. I've struggled with depression most of my life. It's hard for me to shake the feeling of being useless. I'm doing much better now. But when I was a kid, it was horrible. Because of that, I spent a lot of time alone in my room. My house was nestled in every woodsy area. There were trees on 3 sides of it and a forest separating it from any neighbors. My room was pretty big for a bedroom. It was in the back corner of the house, so the windows on 2 walls faced the woods. It was honestly pretty scary for a kid my age. It didn't help that I was also scared of the dark. Things started happening when I was around 10 or so. I was in the 5th grade, and I was at the age where it wasn't acceptable to sleep in my parents' bed after a nightmare, but I was still accused of having an active imagination. The first thing I noticed was my nightlight. It had different color settings. So if I wanted, I could change the LED around. I liked keeping it red, which is what I fell asleep to most nights. One night, though, I woke up randomly in the middle of the night, which was unusual for me. I was really tired and fell back asleep under Aminute. But before I did notice that my nightlight was a different color than the red I always left on. I didn't think much of it until about a week later. One morning, I woke up and realized my nightlight was once again not set a red like it always was. I asked my parents why they were messing with my nightlight, but they were confused and told me they didn't know what I was talking about. I explained what had happened to them, and then they told me that the thing had always been glitchy. They knew best. So I accepted that answer for a while, at least until one morning after waking up to see me nightlight unplugged completely. It was just sitting there on the floor. Once again, my parents dismissed my concern and told me my brain should be focused on school. My dad said I was getting too old for a nightlight anyway. A few days later, my nightlight was missing completely. It had seemingly evaporated out of existence. Now I knew my parents were leaning to meth. They probably thought it should have outgrown the nightlight by then and took matters into their own hands. This incident caused a massive fight between them. Since both of you accused the other of hiding it, and neither of us was budging. I couldn't believe my parents would blatantly lie to me about something like this. But there was no thing I could do after that things went back to normal for a week that didn't last long, thought 3 nights in a row. I woke up randomly in the middle of the night. Each time I had no idea what was waking me up after it happened a 4th time in a row. It told my parents, they told me that I was going through puberty, and that changes to me body are natural the next time it happened. I stayed awake instead of falling back asleep a few minutes after I woke up. I heard faint rustling noises from my parents didn't believe. Me and my dad even checked my closet, and there was nothing in there besides old toys and posters. The next 4 days remained the most traumatizing nights I've ever experienced in my life. I'd been woken up only to hear rustling in my closet. It was torture. I couldn't take it anymore. I begged my parents to believe me, and my dad got angry. He dragged me to my closet to prove there was nothing in there. He started throwing toys around my room, clearing in the close bit by bit, yelling at the whole time, that is until he pulled one of the posters off the wall. Me mother and father stared in horror at the massive hole in the wall. The posters had concealed. My mom started screaming, and my dad pulled out a flashlight. The hole was weighted deep to see where it led, so me dad ran outside and inspecting the outside of the house. There was a tin hole in the dirt at the base of the house, and a little digging revealed that it was more than a diva. There was literally a passageway from the woods to my room. My mom and I were out of the house that night to my aunt's house. We moved out shortly after this. I stayed at my aunt's house until I don't like thinking about this experience, but I'm going to have to face that eventually my parents also refused to talk about this incident. And I think it's partly because they feel some blame for not taking me seriously. It's chilling to think that there was a stranger in my room every night for over a month. I have no idea what they wanted, and will probably never know if your kids come to you with something that sounds abnormal. Believe then my name is Leo. To be completely honest with you, I'm a little lost in life right now. I won't get into it too much, but all you need to know is that my family situation is horrible. And for the past 3 years, I've tried to stay as far away from home as possible. My close friends from high school have been changing in ways I don't like, and I feel like my hometown has nothing to offer me anymore. I'm about to be a senior in college, and to be completely honest, I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to do with my life. After that, enough with the sad story though. I was in Berlin last year for whatever reason, probably searching for a sense of place or trying to find a direction in life. I remember the name of the bar. I was in Rue. I was there alone, nothing I'm not used. So I was getting ready to leave when I felt around my pocket and realized my apartment keys were missing. Just my luck, I stumbled out of the bar and began walking toward my apartment anyway. The whole thing was locked up, there was no way. I was getting in there, and it was way too late at night to get air placements. Said I'm not sure what most people would do in a situation like this, but my first thought was, start looking for a place to sleep. Ace, if my luck wasn't bad enough, it started raining eventually. I decided to sleep under a nearby bridge. I didn't even know where I was, but I was out of the rain and safe, so I was happy. As I was drifting off, I began picking up on some faint voices coming from across the river. I zapped back up and saw what looked like 5 men standing on the opposite side of the river, along with a little boat that was tied off. They didn't seem to notice me. It took me less than a minute to realize what I was watching. There was an honest-to-God drug deal or something going down right in front of me. My German isn't great, so I wasn't really able to make out what they were saying, but several briefcases and duffel bags were exchanging hands. So I filled in the blanks myself. I thought about finding a new spot, but I didn't want to draw attention to myself by moving. I figured I'd just wait for this to be over, then leave. All of a sudden, one of the men yelled something aggressively in German and pointed a gun at one of the other men. There was a brief moment of silence before the other guy put his hands up and began talking really quickly. It looked like he was being set up. The other men stripped the man at gunpoint of his clothing and started confiscating his belongings. I didn't feel safe there anymore and got up slowly to move. As I did, I heard one of the men shout what roughly translates to "there's someone there." I started running, not venturing to look at them. They shouted more things at me, but the only words I was able to understand were "don't shoot." I ran until I threw up and nearly passed out due to drunken exhaustion. There was no way they'd be able to catch me, but they could have easily killed me sometimes. I still think about how I could have lost my life that night if those men had decided to fire at me. Sometimes I feel like I'm fated to run forever. It was a normal Friday afternoon at my high school. I was walking down a hallway with my friend Emma, as talked about God knows what. I was just trying to get through the day because I honestly had a lot to deal with at home, as well as at school, being that my foster parents weren't the nicest people, to say the least. As we walked past the lunchroom, I suddenly had to use the bathroom. I asked Emma if she had to go. She said no and that she would wait outside for me. I went into the bathroom and immediately noticed no one else was in there. I thought to myself that was weird because out of the multiple bathrooms in the school, this one was always packed to tenny. Given time, I shrugged it off and went into a stall, and a few seconds after getting in the stall and sitting down, I heard the bathroom entrance door open and shut abruptly, and someone entering the bathroom, but I didn't see a move after entering. I didn't think anything of this. It wasn't really anything out of the ordinary. Maybe it was someone hiding from an admin. I went about my business. I stood up to button my jeans and read the writing on the bathroom wall. There was a bunch of random quotes and route teachers. Then I heard the door open again, and I assumed whoever was in here had left. I came out of the stall, and as I left the bathroom, Emma was looking at me with a weird face, almost like a "what the hell did I just see" face. I asked her what was up, and she asked me who was that standing right behind you in the bathroom stall. I got chills. I told her Noon was in the stall with me and to stop. With Mesha promised Mesh she wasn't, she told me she actually came in seconds before I came out because she realized she did need to go. But then she saw someone else in the stall standing with their shoes touching the back of mine. That's how close they were behind me in the stall, and she said she left immediately, not wanting to witness whatever was going on. I reiterated again, I was the only one in the stall. However, I had heard someone come in, but I never heard them use the bathroom, and I had assumed they were hiding from an admin. That's when she told me Noon went near the door. Until she came in seconds before I came out, I didn't believe in the paranormal, but this made my stomach sink. I found an admin and told her about it, and she pretty much tried to assure me that it didn't happen, that Emma was probably just messing with me. But Emma was never one to take things seriously or be serious in general, so when she looked me in the eyes with a serious face and told me word for word what she saw, I felt like it actually happened, and something really was in there with me, along with the fact that I heard the bathroom door open and close twice. I'm 18 now, and I haven't forgotten it since. This happened long ago when I was